Hey everyone, and welcome back to Newegg TV. My name is Paul. Today I'm going to be doing an unboxing and overview of this new motherboard from Gigabyte. This is the Gigabyte G1.Sniper A88X. Let's start off with a closer look at the retail box. First off, if you're not familiar with this particular platform, this is an FM2 Plus motherboard, as is indicated right there. That is the socket, and that is designed for AMD's line of APUs, or accelerated processing units. Now, if you look at AMD's processor lineup, basically you've got the APUs, which include both the CPU as well as a GPU, so you can use them without a discrete graphics card. And then you also have AMD's series of processors, such as the 8350, and those are designed for the AM3 Plus socket, and those do not have an iGPU. So those are kind of the two lines that AMD has out right now. The A series has gone through a few iterations. We've seen FM1, which is now in the past. FM1 has been eclipsed by FM2, and now we're seeing FM2 Plus motherboards. Now, important thing to point out is that this motherboard will be backwards compatible with the existing FM2 APUs. However, if you're purchasing a new APU, such as the upcoming Kaveri APUs, which are scheduled to launch in the fourth quarter of 2013, those you will need an FM2 Plus motherboard for. So if you're planning to upgrade to Kaveri, you will need an upgraded motherboard as well. That's how that works. Apart from that, this is a Gigabyte motherboard. It's part of the G1 Killer series. This one's the G1.Sniper, so some more details on that I'm sure can be found here on the back of the box. So the chipset we're working with here is the A88X. The socket, again, is FM2 Plus. It supports AMD's dual graphics, so you can combine your APU with a compatible graphics card and sort of combine the iGPU that's in your APU with the discrete graphics card. It kind of gives you a bit of a Crossfire configuration. You can also just drop in a discrete graphics card as well on this if you want to set up a more high-performance gaming machine. But there are plenty of options, and it's really nice that you can just pop in your APU, get up and running without the need to also run a discrete graphics card. And the APUs have gotten a lot of positive feedback for their abilities to play games, maybe not at the highest of settings that you would get with a discrete card, but still very capable nonetheless. But some features that Gigabyte has integrated onto this board: 8-channel audio with custom gold-plated shielding, exclusive upgradable op amps, so the operational amplifier chip on the board you can actually pop out and add another one. You can buy those separately and they will change the sound profile of the motherboard. You got Nichicon high-end audio capacitors in the audio area of the motherboard. You also have some gain switches built onto the board, which is also a convenience. Long lifespan, all solid capacitors, so they're keeping high-quality components in the board to make sure that it has a nice long lifespan. High temperature protection listed down there for the MOSFETs. You also have Crossfire support, so you can do a two-way Crossfire configuration with the two full-length Pci Express slots on the board. You get a total of 8 serial ATA revision 3 ports on the board. 6 are controlled by the chipset, and then a couple via an add-on chip. UEFI dual BIOS, so that's compatible with, for instance, Windows 8, so you can go for really fast boot times and that sort of thing. And UEFI is the new version of BIOS, which has a lot of newer features for enhanced compatibility, especially with the current generation components. Power failure protection and anti-surge integrated circuits. Humidity protection integrated onto the board via the glass fabric PCB, and then also high electrostatic discharge USB port protection as well. So you're going to make sure that if you're plugging in USB devices, you don't have any risk of damaging them if you happen to have some static electricity. One last thing to point out on the retail box, the specifications area down there, so that's got all your gritty details in case you're interested. And one thing to point out, there are some specifications here that might say memory support is dependent on memory module compatibility as well as your system OS. And bear in mind, when it's saying only FM2 Plus APU supports, for instance, for Pci Express Gen 3, you're only going to get that if you're dropping in one of the newest Kaveri APUs, which are not available as of the filming of this video. So for now, if you're going to be rolling with a Richland or a Trinity APU, which are FM2 APUs that are currently available based on the pile driver architecture, you can drop those in and use them, but it will limit some of the functionality of the board. But let's jump in and go ahead and take a look at accessories, since we do have accessories in this box. So first off, motherboard input-output shield, always good to install before installing the motherboard. And this one also has the squishy electromagnetic shielding on the back, which I prefer because it's way less good at cutting your hand when you're trying to install it. You get a total of 4 serial ATA cables. Let me pop out at least a couple of them out of their bags. It looks like they're giving you a couple with straight plugs on both ends and a couple with a straight plug and a 90-degree angle plug, which I also like because sometimes you need the straight plugs and sometimes you need the angled ones, and it's good to have choices. They're both black. They all have the little clasps on the end to hold them in place, and they'll all be compatible with SATA revision 1, 2, or 3 devices. So even the speedy SSDs, you can plug those in. They'll work just fine. You get a Gigabyte case badge, which you can put on your case to show your Gigabyte pride for your Gigabyte motherboard. And then you get this Gigabyte AMD Gaming Series Utilities driver disk. Chances are you can go to the Gigabyte website rather than using the drivers on this disk, download the latest ones, and that'll give you better compatibility and less chance of any errors with your system. However, that's still convenient to have, particularly if you need to load your network driver and get connected to the internet to download the updated versions. Here is your Gigabyte G1.Sniper A88X Motherboard Manual, which has cool things like a block diagram, which I really like because you can see how everything is connected up in the motherboard. Also a list of all the components that are currently installed, since motherboards do tend to have lots going on. And also sort of basic instructions where all the other ports are, and all of the goodness that you would expect to find in a motherboard manual. Also available in a multilingual installation version. So if English is not your first language, it looks like we have European, which is, oh, I see, this is the European, but we've got Deutsch, which is German, we've got Spanish, we got Portuguese, we got French, and we got Italian all in there. Okay, let's take a look at the motherboard itself now. So the first thing you'll probably notice here is the color, because that tends to jump out. Black and green, as is the theme with many of the G1 Killer Series motherboards. Also some silver kind of scattered throughout, maybe some touches of gold here and there. But the PCB itself is a very nice flat black color, so we'll start off like I usually do by flipping it over to show you the back of that for a better look at that PCB. The heat sinks themselves are also held on by Phillips head screws. So you can remove those. They're spring-loaded and pop those off if you need to remove the heat sinks or anything like that. So that's nice to have. Next up over here, let's take a look at your fan header layout, because there are several of them. I'm counting a total of 4, I believe, but that's because I didn't double-check this beforehand. But yes, it looks like 4 is the correct number. So starting off with your CPU fan header, that's a 4-pin right there at the top. A couple more 4-pin system fan headers. They're just below and to the left of the CPU socket. And then one last 3-pin fan header on the upper right-hand section of the board right there. So you should have a decent amount of fan connectivity if you're planning on wiring your case fans directly up to your motherboard. Now let's take a close look at the board in detail. We're going to start down here in the lower right-hand section of the board. Now, I had a slight error when I was going over the box, and that was that I said 2 of these were add-on SATA 3 ports. They're not. They're actually all controlled by that A88X chipset, which is super nice because natively controlled ports are always better. And it also supports RAID configurations, so you can do RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, RAID 10, or JBOD, which is also cool. And you'll notice a couple of them are right angle ports right there. Those are the ones that might theoretically conflict with a secondary graphics card if you had that installed in the lower long green slot. To the left of the SATA ports, we've got your front panel connectors right there. They're color-coded in that little box, and there's a little chart located right beneath them, so you can kind of get a better idea of what is what. You also have a clear Cmos jumper right there. Just bring your own jumper for it, and you can clear your Cmos. And to the left of the front panel headers, you got a couple USB 2.0, also front panel connectors. Each of those will power a couple USB 2.0. I should note that all the connectivity on this board, again, is controlled pretty much directly by the A88X chipset, which again is always going to be your best situation. To the left of those USB 2.0 headers, we've got a TPM, or Trusted Platform Module header, which is more used for security if you're going to be setting this up in an office environment, for example. COM header is located right there. Then we have some audio connectivity. We got an SPDIF out, little 2-pin jumper right there, or header I should say. And then front panel audio connector right there, standard front panel HD audio type connectors. So route that to your case's front panel microphone and headphone jacks, and that will get those working. For audio, you have some of that going up the side of the board here. You might notice this little sort of lighter colored track going along. This is a PCB separation layer, so they've done that to separate the audio componentry here on the left with the rest of the components on the right. and that will help reduce noise and interference from messing with your audio signal. You also have the Amp Up audio shield right there, kind of gold in color. The audio chip on this board is a Realtek ALC898 codec chip, supports up to 7.1 channel audio configurations, and then you can also see some of those Nichicon caps, which are located right there. This little separation layer here will also light up green when the board is powered on, which is pretty cool. One last thing is the gain switches, which are located right here, which is something that you don't see on boards too much, but it's listed right here next to it, these two switches. Default position is 1, that will give you 2.5x gain, and you're supposed to switch both of them at the same time if you're going to. I'm guessing it's left and right channel, but position 2 will give you 6x gain. So if you want your headphones to be louder, flip those switches. And then there is your swappable op amp chip, which is located right there as well, so you can pop that out and swap in a new one if you want to change your sound profile, which is kind of a cool feature for built-in audio on a motherboard. Let's talk about PCI Express next. Well, PCI expansion slots in general, I should say, because you got both PCI down here at the bottom, a couple legacy PCI slots if you have some older devices. You have 3 PCI Express X1 slots, the black ones that are right there, and then you have 2 full-length PCI Express X16 slots. So these are more suitable for graphics cards or other add-on cards. The top one here is wired up for 16X. The lower one here is wired up for 8X. And again, those do support two-way Crossfire configurations if you are going to be adding on discrete graphics card. If you are going to be using dual graphics, or the dual graphics technology, which means combining a discrete graphics card with the APU, or with the iGPU and your APU in the socket up there, just double check the APU that you purchased, because it will have a list of compatible graphics cards for using the dual graphics technology. Your options are a little bit more limited. So again, it just becomes more of a cost-effective solution, whether it's cost-effective to buy a lesser power card that will run with the dual graphics, or to buy just a discrete graphics card and use that all by itself. But you do have those options. I did also want to point out, while we're right here, got a couple BIOS chips that are integrated onto the board right there. So this motherboard does have dual BIOS, which can really save your butt if your BIOS decides to become corrupt because your case on-off switch has, for some reason, stopped working properly, and you can't figure out what the heck's going on, and suddenly your BIOS starts backing itself up onto itself, and you're like, anyway, that's what happened to me, and that's when dual BIOS saved me. Anyway, I have an anecdotal story to talk about with dual BIOS now. I'm getting too far off track, though. Let's continue on to the G1 Killer logoed heatsink, which is located over there to the right. So that's right on top of the A88X chipset, which, like I said, is controlling just a ton of the connectivity on this board, including your SATA ports, which I've already gone over, including your USB 2.0, including all the USB 3.0 on the board. So very cool to have all that connectivity natively controlled. We're just going to keep moving up the side of the board since I've already covered your SATA. You do have a front panel USB connector right there, 20-pin for a couple USB 3.0 front panel ports. Above that, you have your 24-pin main motherboard power connector. That's located right there. And then above that, you got the system fan header that I already kind of pointed out when we were going over the board at the beginning. The next area we're going to talk about is Ddr3 memory. So you got all your memory slots right here. I'll just close those little tabs up for you. This is dual channel memory, so make sure you buy a dual channel kit with 2 matched sticks to go side by side, because that's going to be your best bet for compatibility and also getting the most out of your memory. When it comes to memory support, 1.5 volt Ddr3 DIMMs are recommended. This supports up to 64 gigabytes of system memory, so up to 8 gigs. Wait, no, 64. 64 divided by 4, that would be 16. Okay, if you can get your hands on 16 gig memory modules, according to the book, it's compatible here. That might be a bit overkill for this motherboard, but hey, it's compatible with it. You can still use lesser DIMMs like 8 gig or 4 gig DIMMs. Again, just buy a matched pair. Or a matched set of 4, because that'll give you your best bet. It does support DDR3 speeds up to 2133, as well as AMP or AMD memory profile compatibilities. And this one can even read XMP, which is Intel's memory profile setup in DDR3 DIMMs. And this board can actually also read it, so that's pretty cool too. But moving to the left of that, here's your FM2 Plus socket. This is backwards compatible with FM2 APUs, but not FM1. So if you're using an FM2 APU such as Trinity or Richland right now, you can drop that right into this motherboard. And in fact, as of right now, since the newest FM2 Plus APUs are not currently out. Those will be codenamed Kaveri. Once again, when they do come out, those will be using steamroller cores, up to 4 of them, and those will also have an iGPU with integrated GCN architecture, which is pretty cool. So a lot to look forward to with this board right now. But again, you can get it up and running right now with the APUs that are currently available, and just not backwards compatible with FM1, and definitely don't try to drop like an AM3 Plus processor in here, because it just won't work. The mounting solution here, you can see the top half of it. One thing AMD has done for quite some time is they've maintained a standard for that socket, so pretty much just about any FM1, FM2, AM2, AM3, AM3 Plus, any of those coolers will fit onto that mounting solution, so that's pretty cool. You can see some of the power delivery components located around the socket. You also have an additional GIGABYTE heatsink with the GIGABYTE logo on it on the upper left right there, providing some helpful cooling for some of those MOSFETs, which tends to heat up, especially if you're going to be doing any overclocking, since there's lots of FM2 and FM2 Plus, presumably, APUs that are fully unlocked for overclocking, which is pretty cool. Finally, your supplemental 8-pin CPU power connector right there at the top. Make sure you route a cable over there from your power supply to set that up. And then actually one thing I forgot to mention, if we could go back wide for just a moment, Steve, this motherboard is a ATX standard motherboard, so bear that in mind when you're choosing out your case, but not quite as wide as a typical ATX motherboard. This board actually measures about 8 7/8 inches wide, whereas a standard ATX is about 9.6 inches wide, so a little bit more space in the case with a slightly narrower profile on the ATX motherboard. But let us finish here with the I/O on the board, since there's a lot of that as well. So starting off here on the left side, you got a combo PS2 port for a mouse or a keyboard. A couple USB 2.0 ports right there, also going to be an ideal location to plug in mouse or keyboard. You have video outs located right here because, again, you will be using an APU with this motherboard, so you will have integrated video in that APU, so you can use these video outs for that. You got the D-sub, dual link DVI, as well as HDMI, and when it comes to output compatibility, that will vary depending on the processor that you're installing here, so bear that in mind. But for instance, just to point out one difference between these, the HDMI port right here can support 4K resolution if you're going with an FM2 Plus. If you're going with an FM2, it will do up to 1920 by 1200, so bear that in mind. You also have USB 3.0 ports, so a couple more right there, again, natively controlled. Another side-facing USB 3.0 port right there with some gold contacts around it, so let me double check and see if that has anything special going on with it. USB 2.0 ports right there, giving you a total of 4 on the back. A gigabit network interface card that's provided by Realtek. And then also all of your gold-plated analog audio connection points for your mic, as well as all of your speaker outputs, as well as your optical Toslink audio out, again, for your Realtek ALC 898 7.1 channel audio. And I have discovered what this gold-plated USB 2.0 port is right there for. I actually said that on the back of the box, but I totally blanked and did not cover it. It's a USB DAC up, so a digital to analog converter. If you have a USB-based one of those, this is going to provide clean, low-noise power for your digital to analog converter. So again, part of the audio focus on this board, and an extra connectivity available, particularly if you have a USB DAC. And that is going to wrap it up for this video, guys. Once again, we've been taking a closer look at the GIGABYTE G1.Sniper A88X motherboard for AMD's new FM2 Plus APUs, as well as backwards compatible with the existing FM2 APUs. I'm Paul with Newegg TV. If you enjoyed this video, found it useful, entertaining, or otherwise digestible, go ahead and leave us some feedback down in the feedback section down below. You can hit the like button, the dislike button, leave a comment for me. But thanks for watching anyway, and we'll see you next time.